Hi, this is the Film Mania channel, and this is the movie Moth, the story of a petty thief, Henri Charrière, who is wrongly convicted of murder and sent to prison on Devil's Island, where he meets counterfeiter Louis, with whom they make several escape attempts.
What were you living for?
The movie begins with the message that the story is based on true events. Then a window opens in the iron prison door, from which the protagonist, the prisoner Henri Charrière, nicknamed Moth, looks out. The events are transferred to Paris in 1931. Moth skillfully opens the safe in someone's apartment, then descends down the drain and goes to the bar to give the loot. He has a meeting with the owner of the establishment, who brags about the skills of his thugs in beating up a bound snitch. After taking the Moth's loot of diamonds, the boss hints that Henri will suffer a worse fate if he tries to take some of the loot for himself. A few minutes later, the Moth is waiting in an alley for his girlfriend, who has very nimble, pickpocket-like hands that she uses for a living. He gives her a necklace, not at a very opportune moment. The jewelry catches the eye of one of the boss's ringleaders. After a fun time in the company of a beautiful lady and a bottle of strong alcohol, the landlord knocks on the Moth's apartment. Out of a great desire to give the money for the next month, the thief opens the door, at which moment the gendarmes break in, accusing him of murdering his pimp, who was beaten up by the same thugs. In the end, he tells his beloved that he will return to her, no matter what it costs him. In the cell, the protagonist gets acquainted with the raider Zulo. His new friend recommends him to find money, otherwise the idea of escape can be forgotten. During the medical examination, Zulot points him to Louis Degas, a counterfeiter who is sure to have money. After the medical examination, the prisoners are told that they will be deported to the French Guiana, where they will spend the best years of their lives working for the good of their homeland. During the crossing, Henri offers Louis protection, for a fee, of course. If he refuses, the local intelligentsia may rid him of both his ability to exist and his personal finances. Louis takes time to think about it, but that same night he witnesses a huge fat man gutting his neighbor for his stash. After assessing all the risks, the counterfeiter accepts the Moth's offer. The next night, a fat man with a knife tries to kill Louis, but is defended by his new friend. A brawl ensues, which the guards stop by blowing hot steam into the hold. The guards check the prisoner's hands. Henri's bloody bones indicate his involvement in the fight, and he is then punished by being shackled. During the landing, Zulot falls down the stairs, having previously injured his leg with a blade. He is taken to the sanitary unit, while the others are taken to get acquainted with the camp and its inhabitants. The commandant, acting as Indiana Jones, does not mind the prisoners' attempts to escape. Those who are not shot at once are put in solitary confinement for 2 years, and if they try again, for 5 years. If they're lucky, the sea is teeming with hungry sharks. But if someone inadvertently kills someone, the commandant will gladly use his favorite invention on the island, the guillotine. However, the warnings do not work on Henri. He is already making a daring escape plan based on what he has learned in the wild. The first point is to get into the infirmary of the cunning Zulot. He makes an agreement with a local prisoner, which he agrees to if the couple will provide the necessary amount of money. Louis takes the stash out of his secret pocket with trepidation and pain. But, as they say, money is tight. After Louis and Henri are assigned to the infirmary as orderlies, everything was going according to plan, until the moment when the deputy commandant recognizes the coin man's face. Because of old grudges, the best friends are sent to hard labor, to carry heavy weights. Here they meet Cellier, a smuggler and prisoner of conscience. The new friend took over the development of the plan, immediately informing them that they need money for a boat. At this time, a bully decides to have an educational conversation with Louis. Moth steps in, but the convoy stops the educational process with a warning shot in the air. On the way back, the guards pick up a local pimp and his courtesan stuck in the mud. The Moth tries to negotiate with him, but the latter, under the pretext of surrendering him, inflates the price and gives the prisoners 3 days for everything, after which the contract is canceled. Later, during a shower, a group of familiar comrades try to finish what they started, but a little agility and Mike Tyson style help Henry in this battle. Watching from the sidelines, Louis realizes that he won't last much longer and asks to be taken with him to the outside. The next day, the prisoners are taken to the square for a show execution. During the night, there was an escape attempt in which one of the guards was killed. The condemned man turned out to be Julot. After beheading, the commandant orders Moth and Louis to remove the body, which the latter does not like. As they're carrying the body, the moneymaker gets sick. He collapses. The warden starts beating him, which pisses Moth off. He hits the jailer on the head with a stone and wants to run away with his friend. However, exhausted and shaken Louis, he is forced to leave. Henry jumps into the river, trying to escape the bullets fired by the guards. At night, Moth reaches the pimp's boat. Asked to give him a loan for lack of funds, the man laughs, and his friends emerge from the darkness with guns. Because of the good relationship between the pimp and the commandant, the Moth is brought back. Henri is locked in solitary confinement for 2 years, where the silence cannot be disturbed. There, he is periodically beaten and fed leftovers. One day, he finds half a coconut in a bucket of water and a note saying that from now on the dessert will always be there. This gives him a kind of hope. He starts exercising to keep himself in shape. However, suspecting something wrong, one of the guards checks the bucket and finds a coconut. The commandant visits the prisoner to find out who gave him the coconuts. The Moth remains silent, even when his rations are halved and the roof over his head is closed, plunging him into total darkness. The loneliness, darkness, and silence torment him with hallucinations and visions of the past. However, his strength has not left him, and after 2 years he is transferred from the punishment cell to the infirmary, where he successfully portrays a madman. During this time, Louis managed to become a clerk and gain some authority. He visits Henri in the hospital and informs him that he has not given up the idea of escape and tells him about his plan. In a few days, a movie night will be arranged for special guests. The commandant will increase the guards, but they will be mostly for the safety of the guests, and the perimeter will be empty. At the same time, the noise from the movie will mask their footsteps. Henri fakes a bout of insanity so that the doctor will sedate him, which he doesn't drink, saving the pills to carry out the plan. Then he talks to a handsome guy who has taken a fancy to a bulky orderly. He's given the task of distracting him at the right moment. And finally, he meets with Cellier. His job is to get the boat. Louis has to give him his entire stash to rent a boat. On the day of the reception, Louis, playing the role of a waiter, slips a sedative into the vodka he gives to the guards under the guise of a presentation from the commandant. At this time, a handsome guy distracts a horny guard. Henri and Cellier unscrew the legs from the beds, then go to the shower room where they stun the guard. After taking the keys from him, they go down to the first floor, where the guard is lying senseless from the author's cocktail. Suddenly, it starts to rain, the movie show is interrupted, and the guests are escorted under the roof. A short circuit causes the lights to go out. At the sound of sirens, Louis unlocks the door to his comrades, and together they climb out onto the wall. As they jump down, the electricity comes back on. From the surprise, Louis lands badly and breaks his leg. He is dragged to the riverbank, where a paid boat with a salesman is supposed to be waiting. They are met by armed men. Under pressure, Louis gives the last of his money to take them to the hidden boat. The plan worked, and by dawn the fugitives made their way by boat down the river to the ocean. However, the raft-like vessel soon fills with water. The newly minted sailors do not have time to scoop out the water. Cellier, as captain, wants to throw out one of the minor traveling companions. The Moth makes it clear to the fugitive that this is not going to happen. This is not why they all ran together. The situation worsens when a storm appears on the horizon. Cellier tries to whip up a smarmy against Louis and pulls out a knife. However, the latter refuses to attack his new friend and lunges at the bulky man and flies overboard a second later. A fight ensues between Cellier and the Moth, in which the former nearly drowns the latter. At this point, Louis, realizing that the death of his friend is not the most favorable outcome, picks up a shiv and begins to systematically poke Cellier in the back with it. After dumping the corpse overboard and picking up their comrade, they get caught in the storm. In the next scene, Henri regains consciousness somewhere in a cabin on some island. It is unclear how they made it to land, but the locals, led by Christian nuns, shelter them. Moth finds Louis with a broken leg and tells him to leave, but the latter, out of excessive local kindness, refuses the offer. Neither does the smarmy guy want to leave. After a long imprisonment with men, he likes charming natives. Moth leaves the camp alone, but on climbing the mountain he sees the warden's car, warned by the nun. He goes back to warn his comrades, but does not have time. Smudgy is shot before his eyes, and they are taken with Louis, who is touched that Henri has come back for him, risking himself. In the next shot, the dried and gray-haired Moth is released from solitary confinement after 5 years. The commandant sends him to Devil's Island, a prison on a lonely rock in the middle of the ocean, from which it is impossible to escape, because the ocean stretches for thousands of kilometers around. There, in an old fortress, the dregs of prison society live out their last days. Henri is met by an aged and limping Louis. The commandant, for the old merits of the clerk, did not put him in solitary confinement for 2 years and immediately sent him to eternal exile on the island. With plenty of time on his hands, the money grubber decided to remember the art of his ancestors and began to paint the walls with charcoal, which he did quite well. However, after so many years and unsuccessful attempts, Henri is not satisfied with it. He still longs for freedom. For that, he needs access to the ocean. Louis leads him to a cliff from which he can jump into the water and survive, but where to go without a boat? Watching the ocean, Moth notices a pattern and makes a plan to make a raft from improvised materials, which will be carried by the water to the big land. He and Louis make it out of coconuts, bags, and anything else they can get their hands on. However, on the day of the escape, Coin Man refuses, as he has nowhere to go back to, and he is already well settled here. And he can't survive with a bad leg. The friends say goodbye, after which Mothman throws the raft into the water and jumps after him. Lua excitedly watches the circles on the water, but does not see his comrade. Having lost hope for a moment, he takes off his glasses and wipes his tears when a cheering voice comes from below. Henri succeeds in swimming out. The comrades say goodbye to each other, after which the Moth sways on the vast ocean waves. A passenger liner suddenly flies through the sky. The scene shifts to 1969. An aged and alive Henri flies to Paris, where he is still considered a criminal. He brings to a publishing house his notes, an autobiography about the unfair and hard life in the colonial settlement, which he has written down from fresh memory. He feels that it is in France, the country where he was wrongly sentenced to such a life, that these notes should be published. The movie ends with archival footage and credits that while Moth was still alive in 1952, the prison was closed for good. His book became a bestseller, and Henri himself was pardoned by the Minister of Justice. This is where the movie ends.